Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Taylor Combluzier, mining analyst here at Red Cloud Securities. Today's webinar focuses on CMC Metals Ltd, which is focused on its projects in the emerging Rancheria Silver District in the Yukon and British Columbia, as well as its copper gold projects in Newfoundland. Today, I have with me on the webinar Kevin Brewer, who's the President, CEO, and Director at CMC Metals. The format of today's webinar will be comprised of two parts. In the first part, Kevin will provide an update on CMC Metals, including an overview of the company's exploration work at its flagship Silver Hart property, where drilling has recently intercepted over 4,900 grams per ton silver equivalent over 2.3 meters. Kevin will also touch on the company's other projects, including its Silverknife and Amy properties near Kerr Mining's Silvertip mine, as well as its Gander properties in Newfoundland, including the recently optioned Rodney Pond project. In the second part of the webinar, we'll take your questions live. So please submit any questions you may have using the chat function, and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. To start, we'll handle the disclosures and then get into the presentation. So for CMC Metals, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the CMC Metals corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. And we note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for CMC Metals specific disclosures. So with that out of the way, I'll turn it over to Kevin to update you on CMC and what you have to look forward to with this company.
Well, thank you, Taylor, very much. Appreciate Red Cloud's involvement again, and always good to have you on the line. Yes, as Taylor said, we're going to be presenting mostly some on the projects in Yukon, Northern British Columbia, our carbonate replacement deposit, or CRD targets. We will make some forward-looking statements today, and I'm going to briefly touch on our Newfoundland projects. So without further ado, we're on both sides of the country, and people say, well, maybe you're a bit crazy, Kevin, taking projects that are 5,000 miles away from each other. But I am from Newfoundland, and so it was nice to get back there, and we got some really great projects, copper, silver, polymetallic projects in Newfoundland. They are early stage, but we're very excited. There's some great mineral prospects existing on them and outcrops, and we are doing some work. So you'll see a press release soon on more work we're doing on those properties. And that's all I'm going to talk about today with respect to the Newfoundland projects. So we're over to the west coast, and we're in a district called the Rancheria Silver District. And CMC has 5 projects there: Silver Hart, our flagship property, Amy, Silverknife, and 2 other projects, Rancheria South and Blue Heaven. So all of these are what we call CRD deposit or Silvertip style deposits that we're trying to pursue in the Rancheria Silver District. And why I call them Silvertip style is there's a company called Kerr Mining who have the only mine so far in this belt, but I expect there'll be lots of others in the foreseeable future. But the Silvertip mine is one of the highest grade silver, zinc, lead underground mines in the world, and sits within a prospective land package, which we call the Rancheria Silver District. Now, up to now, I mean, you look at Silver Hart, and I think many who probably on this presentation are somewhat familiar with us, is that exploration at Silver Hart has been taking place since 1985. And at that time, people had identified high-grade silver, lead, zinc veins on the surface, and you can see the outline of these in our drill hole locations. So basically the red lines are those silver veins that have been discovered so far. And there's been a lot of work on those particular locations, on those veins, and more identified since we've been active. This company was active on this project since 2005 in different stages. And since 2019, I've been involved in the project. We did a short 1,100 meter program in that year. And really, I was just getting to know the project at that time and started to look around and getting on my ATV and roaming around the countryside, and started to identify that there was a lot more mineralization on this property than just in this small confined area, and that maybe we should start to look beyond. So we drilled, and we got some beautiful intersections, both in the 2019 program and in the 2021 program. We've done 3,200 meters over the past 3 years. But I considered sort of 2020 my homework year. And as a result of that, we did an initial resource, because I wanted to know kind of where we stood with respect to resources in the ground in these veins. And so here's a picture of one of the veins. And overall, there's 7.5 million ounces of silver equivalent in the ground here at a very nice, attractive grade of 584 grams a ton. And that was stated in our 43-101 resource estimate in, I think it was early 2021. But where do we want to go from there? Well, I started thinking about that and decided that the best thing to do would be to fly an airborne survey over this property. So what we did was we flew actually all of the properties in a SkyTem survey. We did that in cooperation with Kerr Mining, who also flew all of their properties at the same time. And we started to identify that we should really be pursuing the carbonate replacement deposits, or I'm going to call them CRDs from now on. And we wanted to do that because these are much larger deposits. They tend to be 10 to 150 million tons in size. They occur in clusters. They're high grade in nature. They form at high temperatures. They're a high temperature greater than 250 degrees Celsius. But they're typically low cost mines. And there's some beautiful examples of projects that have been extremely successful, like Cinco de Mayo or Taylor deposit down in Arizona there. So these are beautiful targets. So going back to our story, we flew those properties in early 2021, and we announced out the results afterwards. It was done in March. And we came up with all these wonderful conductor zones and beautiful targets, 8 targets all together on the Silver Hart. And you can see the size of them, because basically that vein length, the main length is 1.4 kilometers. So you can imagine how big these targets really are. So we started looking at these, and here they are in bigger fashion. Now, I'm going to take you through the cross sections, first of all with T1 and then into T4. I'm just going to take you through. So we're going to slice the pie and show you what those look like. So here's T1. It's a large lateral conductor. It has a vertical extent of up to 250 meters. Laterally, it has an extent of 1,100 meters. And it's got a strike in excess of 800 meters. Now, this is a huge target. It starts at surface, goes down. The holes there are planned for anywhere from 200 to 350 meters. And basically what we're going to do is do a cross sections of holes across the conductor, a long strike, and see what we hit. Now, I'm going to take you back to this again, and we're going to take a slice right through T4 at this point, line 102-801. And here again, you see that there's a similar target, a little bit smaller. It's got an extent of up to 150 meters, a lateral extent in excess of 750 meters, and a strike of over 600 meters. Now, I'm going to go back to the previous slide just for a second, because the one thing I want to note is the proximity. Those red lines are the silver veins that everybody's been exploring right now. And they potentially represent feeders to these systems. So it's exactly what you want to see, is these mineralized veins going into these lateral areas where where you got the high temperatures, you will get the replacement of the limestones and the skarns in the sediments, which is exactly where these conductors are. They're in sedimentary sequences, and you're in close proximity to both the veins and the intrusives. The intrusives provide the heat, and those veins need to be hot. Those mineral fluids need to be hot when they're hitting those sediments to create those carbonate replacement deposits. And so that's the exact setting. Now, what else did we want to do? Well, I wanted to validate those targets a little bit more before we went and drilled them. So I decided last season that we would run a campaign of soil geochemistry over these targets and see what they look like. And sure enough, we found that we've had these wonderful silver, lead, zinc anomalies. And this in this particular slide, it's the silver. But you can see all those purple and reds and oranges. They're all very high-grade silver concentrations in soils. So you've got a big, huge clusters right over the conductors, which is exactly what you would want to see, because it suggests that those conductors actually do have sulfides that contain silver, lead, and zinc. Now, the other thing that you want to know is that you're in the right geological area. So everything that's in the orange and pink on these slides is the granites or the heat source, and everything that's in the blue and the green and the aquas is in the sediments. So again, you can see that the two circles, the T1 and T4, have the right ingredients. They're right next to the intrusives. They're sitting in the sediments. And those little black squiggly lines are the conductivity. And you want it not to be super sharp, but you want a moderate conductivity over these. Silver, lead, and zinc will provide a moderate conductivity signature. So we've got all the ingredients, both geologically, geophysically, and then just to top it off, we didn't have those soil results until too late in the season, so we didn't get to trench them. But we did start to drive a drill road down towards the T1 target, and we were using a cat. We didn't have our excavator, so we couldn't go digging around too much. But the cat starts exposing mineralization. And so, again, we're seeing the right ingredients. We're seeing the evidence of mineralization there. We got the geochem targets, and we have the right setting, and we're near the heat source. So we've got everything we should have for the ingredients of a carbonate replacement deposit. So we're very excited about that. Now, the other benefit to CMC is we don't only have one property, Silver Hart, with CRD targets. We have at least three in total. And I'm going to introduce you to two more targets. So we're down a little bit closer to the Silvertip mine at this point. In the figure, you can see the Silvertip mine is on the bottom right-hand corner. And you got the first project, which is Silverknife. We share the western boundary of the Silvertip mine claims. And there's a prospect there that was drilled that crosses the boundary between our properties. But it was a lovely, it had 30 holes into it. And the average assay values were like 511 grams a ton silver, 3.7 grams a ton gold, over 12% lead, and almost 5% zinc. Beautiful prospect. Now, our geophysics is showing that there's possible western extensions of that Silverknife prospect into our property. So we're going to do a gravity survey on that project and bring it up to drill ready stage, and then eventually explore it that way. And so it's only 1 kilometer away from the Silvertip mine and mill, which is very exciting. And then you've got Amy, which is equally as prospective. It's a great project. It was looked at in the 60s and 70s. There was a diamond drill holes put into a mineralized zone, which had over 170 meters of strike in a limestone. So it's a CRD setting. and they had some wonderful results. 80,000 tons between the two adit levels, with over almost 800 grams a ton silver equivalent. So these are wonderful prospects. We've got an alteration zone on that project that extends for over 4 kilometers, has a width of a minimum 500 meters. So there's a ton of work being done on that, and being done in the past. We just here's a picture of the site. You can see the extent of historical work in the area, and we just hired SRK Consulting to do a compilation of that work and help sort us out. What we want to do is go in there this season, reopen some of those trenches, and sort out the property and put the drill pads in place to get it ready. Here's a sample of the mineralization from one of the adits, and they had 200 feet strike sample in the 4450 level of over 20 ounces of silver, 5% lead, and 7.5% zinc. Some absolutely beautiful mineralization on that. So the quick point here is we have at least 3 high-grade CRD plays, and this distinguishes CMC from most junior silver explorers. And those grades are very high. They're comparable to Silvertip. Now, we have to put that in focus a little bit. This is a chart of resource grades with silver equivalent grams per ton that Taylor put together for us, and thank you for your work on this, Taylor. And Silvertip is on the far left-hand side, and Silver Hart is the third bar on the left-hand side. And what you can see is that the black is in lead, the blue is the zinc, and the silver is the silver color. And so you can see that not only are these very high grade, but what it also indicates is the importance of lead and zinc to these projects. In our case, it works roughly about 40% to the bottom line. And I know people mostly follow us for silver, but think of lead and zinc as well. It's a very important contributor. And just look at what's happened to lead and zinc in the market in the last year. The prices of those commodities have significantly increased. I think zinc alone has gone from about the $1.05 a pound level to over $1.60. So these are very significant contributors. My slide has gone a bit wonky here. I've had this slide before, and what it does show you, and I'll get this corrected before we post the presentation on the slide on the website, is that our projects, Silver Hart, at the current grade of the resource, is 40% above existing silver mines globally, and 140% greater than average silver explorers and developers. I apologize for the slide. So the bottom line is great CRD projects, amazing grades in the material we're already dealing with, amazing grades from the projects that we're going to take on in the future. And as a result, we feel that we can have a significant resource expansion at our flagship Silver Hart project, especially if we hit on one of T4, T1, or either one of them is going to contribute significant resources to the project. We've got a good baseline of resources already in the vein system, and we haven't yet drilled all the vein off, but we're going to focus this year's efforts on pursuing larger targets. And as I already noted, we're going to take those 2 other CRD projects to the drill ready stage to attract in preferably a joint venture partner, and we're going to validate our Newfoundland properties. And in the long term, we certainly hope that at Silver Hart, we're going to define a standalone project which will have at least 50 million silver equivalent ounces on the project. At Amy and Silverknife, where we're so close to Kerr Mining's mill, it makes more sense for us to define those resources and develop them. and then sell it to them at the gate and let them process it and market it. And with our Newfoundland projects, even though they're very early stage right now, we have high hopes that at least one of those projects is going to turn into a very high-grade polymetallic discovery. On the current plan, our estimated budget for Silver Hart in a 3,500 to 5,000 meter program is around $2 million. And for Amy and Silverknife, it's not going to be too expensive for us to do that work. We're budgeting around $250,000. We've currently got about $600,000 in the bank. Between now and the season, we're going to spend about $350,000, and we got a bit of carryover. So we're going to pursue about $2 million fairly soon in the near future. So that's my presentation for today, and I guess we open up the floor at this stage for questions.
Great, thanks a lot, Kevin. That was a very comprehensive presentation. So we will now turn to the Q&A portion of the webinar, and just a reminder to everybody on the line that you can type in your questions at any moment now. So to start off, we have one question here, just wondering what project are you most excited about with CMC? I know it might be difficult to choose.
Well, I am most excited about Silver Hart, to be honest with you. I mean, we put a ton of homework on this. I mean, you know, I got a geophysicist with 45 years experience. We've also engaged Micon International, who are resource estimation specialists, and they've been looking at the vein systems. They're keeping quite an eye on our targets as well, and they really like what they're seeing. And these guys are telling me, they're telling me that these are the most exciting silver, lead, zinc projects they've worked on in decades. I really see, you know, we've done all the homework, and frankly, I mean, I think we have an above average probability that in those conductivity targets, we're going to see mineralization and a good amount of it. And even if we don't, exploration is a risky business. Let's face it. So say if we don't, we still have a very strong mineralized vein system to continue drilling off, where we can expand resources in that area. We see that we already have the potential for a couple of open pits on the site already to mine those veins. So then we would just have to look at the economics of transporting those 100 kilometers to the Silvertip mill, should we not be able to economically build a mill ourselves. So I am very excited about that. My second choice is clearly Amy. I mean, I walked around that site. The beautiful mineralization in all those trenches. It was open. It was known to be an open deposit. It was also known to have other potential zones. I mean, 4 kilometers of geochem, geophysical, geological, the right geological setting. Again, we're right next to the intrusive. It's all the ingredients are there for an RCRD, and only 8 kilometers away from the mine mill. I mean, it's an absolute beauty, and I think it's going to pay big dividends in the foreseeable future.
Perfect. So you talked a little bit about Silver Hart and doing the 3,500 to 5,000 meters of drilling. Do you have an idea of kind of what split you'd want to see on that would be targeted towards extending the known veins versus testing those new anomalies?
Okay, so we have looked at that, and the 3,500 to 5,000 meters is really only a first pass through those conductors. So it doesn't even eliminate, like if you miss, it doesn't even eliminate the conductors. That's the challenge of the size of the conductors we're dealing with. So we do make a first pass through it. We have had Micon also working on the contingency of drilling off the mineralized veins in a bigger way, and we are sort of having an internal look at how those resources look in a deeper fashion. So we do have a plan that's going to be in place in about a week or two on my desk. I've already seen a preliminary plan on it, but we do have a preliminary plan if we want to go and revisit the veins. we can switch gears very quickly and go back to that strategy again.
Okay, so right now it's all focused on testing up those new targets, essentially.
Yes, we want to go for the bigger targets. I mean, we know a lot about the vein system, and we have a good idea of the overall potential of that vein system. And to really make it economic, we need to find a bigger target. So that's fairly clear to us at this point. And I mean, that's a game changer. You know, if you want a game changer in a company, and just say T1 turns out to be a nice deposit, I think you know, that's going to change CMC dramatically. We're going to be sitting on a very nice project and try to advance it along the PFS stage very quickly.
Okay, great. And you know, Blue Heaven, just south of there, is there any kind of work contemplated on that for this year? Is it really focused in on Silver Hart at this time?
Good question, Taylor. We've looked at it geophysically, and there are a couple targets on the project. We need to do work on that, and we are looking at that. We've been somewhat distracted by our other projects, and so we find ourselves, Blue Heaven and Rancheria South, kind of in the same situation where we see potential in those areas. Frankly, stretched a bit thin, and so I don't want to go too hard on doing that. The focus is clearly on Silver Hart, Amy and Silverknife, and I think that's where it needs to be. And you know, we'll eventually get around to working on those two other projects.
Okay, great. So in the presentation, you mentioned the you know, the Newfoundland properties, and you know, kind of how they fit into your strategy. The core focus being on Silver Hart, obviously. You know, in terms of the exploration that's being conducted, do you have different teams, kind of one for each grouping of projects, or is it the same team?
So yes, well, it's the same team on the geophysics side. Dr. Chris Hale is involved in there, and he's actually been involved in projects in the Gander Zone with companies like Aloro and others. So he is working in the Gander Zone already, in the Avalon Zone rocks. We've also have the ground team in geophysics is the same. So on the geophysics side, it'll be totally the same. On the geological side, it will be different. And so but I'll be working very closely on those projects myself. So we'll have that continuity. The projects, we bought them mostly because, first of all, they added more seasonality to our operations. You know, in northern Yukon, BC, you are limited to like 120-day field season. And Newfoundland, you can work for 9-10 months a year. We got the magnetometer crew out right now on those three projects, and they're working away, and that's good. So it gives us more news flow, but the projects also came to us under extremely reasonable terms, and they are all road accessible. I mean, Bridal Veil's got the Trans-Canada Highway going through the middle of it, so. You know, these were just wonderful projects to pick up. Sure, they're not a newfound gold project. They're not a gold project. They're a copper, silver, lead, plus or minus gold, bismuth, a bit of tungsten kicking around in them, a lot of different mineralization. But it's a great pipeline of projects that we can bring up and advance. And as you know, on the value generation side, in the early stage, if you can get some value in those, the value of those properties is going to sharply increase as we advance them along. So we see value generation for the company in that regard.
Okay, great. And you know, you mentioned the strategy over there. I guess kind of when you were acquiring them, the opportunity was so great because they're so cheap, and as you just outlined, a lot of upside potential. You know, is that something you'd look at if other interesting properties came around for very reasonable terms that you could get? that you could acquire?
At this stage, I'm cautious. I got a pretty good portfolio right now, and people have often been saying, "Are you chewing off too much, Kevin?" And so I got to be a bit careful about achieving the right balance of a property portfolio that we can manage effectively versus one that gets too unwieldy. So we didn't want to go in that direction either. I mean, you do get a lot of good offers come across your table sometimes, and frankly, you just got to be a little bit cautious about taking on anything more at this time. We do love Newfoundland. Newfoundland is one of the best exploration jurisdictions to work in. It's great to get permits. They're great people there. They're very reasonable costs there as well with compared to other places that I've worked. And so we see that as just a wonderful opportunity for CMC Metals.
Great. You did mention permits in that response there. Could you maybe just outline where you sit on that front for your work plan for this year?
Yeah, so we have we've just filed the permits. We have Silver Hart's fully permitted, so there's no issues there. With Amy and Silverknife, I filed the permits with British Columbia 3 weeks ago, and generally it takes 3 to 6 months with British Columbia, so we should be fine there. And we've also filed permits for Terra Nova and Rodney Pond at this stage of the game. And I actually just heard from the Newfoundland government yesterday on one of those permits. So we're working through those right now, and that should get concluded relatively quickly in Newfoundland. So we'll easily have the projects for all of our projects by the time we need them in midsummer.
Okay, perfect. Looks like we are getting down on questions. I think one maybe good one to kind of end on is just if you could, talk a little bit about the key catalysts for investors as you look out into 2022 this year and what's kind of on the horizon.
Okay, so the first thing I would say is the trouble with labs these days, guys, is you're not getting results until 4 or 5 months afterwards. Let's face it. So if we drill in June and we start drilling, I mean, we're going to use XRF this year in the field to have some early indication of how things are going with us. We just can't wait for the labs anymore to give us results and guide our direction. So we're gonna use that to do things. We've got some work coming out on some properties. We're doing the MAG survey right now on the Newfoundland properties. We've got an outstanding soil results at Bridal Veil. We haven't seen them yet from the lab. So we got a little bit of news coming up in the next quarter. And then we typically go into a little bit of hiatus before the season, and then we'll start out getting the exploration going. We'll try to get news out as quickly as we can, but there are limitations, as we say. The other thing I wanted to say is this. I mean, right now we're trading at 15 cents. They're thereabouts. We bounce around 13, 18 any given day. It depends a lot on silver price. People tend to follow us with silver price, even though I try to tell them that lead and zinc are important. And so the bottom line is this. I mean, we're very undervalued right now at 15 cents. I mean, you put out a wonderful report prior to last season with a recommendation. I think it was around 25 cents. And so here we got a full exploration season behind us since. We've acquired another property at Rodney Pond. We're advancing all this work, and we're at 15 cents. We have a good trading volume, so we're a good trading stock. So all I can suggest to people is take a good look at us. I mean, we've got lots of solid properties. We've got lots of contingencies. We've minimized risk in our portfolio. And at the end of the day, we intend to grow this company into a far more significant company than what it is today. So if you are interested or you want to discuss further, you can always call me directly. I suggest you email me first, and I'll arrange a call with you. and I certainly look forward to talking about any of our projects at any time with any potential shareholder or existing shareholders.
Perfect. So with that, I would like to thank Kevin from CMC Metals for taking the time to host the webinar today with Red Cloud Securities. And thank you to everybody on the line for tuning in with us.
Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Have a great day.